Hi, all. Welcome to yet another good podcast series where we are discussing a lot of tech trends and the SaaS trends with global industry leaders. And today we have a very special guest with us, Subbu Swaminathan, who is Senior VP Product and Engineering at Rakuten India GCC. Let's welcome Subbu. Subbu comes with more than 1 decades of experience. He's a product person, an engineering person, and he spearheads the cloud, MarTech, AdTech, Telecom, digital services. Completely a product person at Rakuten. Just about Rakuten. Rakuten is a Japanese based GCC. Sorry, it's a global company. It's a tech company, and especially in India, I think it's a phenomenally they are doing phenomenal job in developing the global products and innovation. It's the hub of innovation here. So let's hear more about Rakuten and about Subbu from Subbu. Let's welcome Subbu. Thanks,
Thank you.
Subbu, for
Thank
taking
you.
out time. And I think finally we could make out the podcast.
Absolutely. Good morning to you and to all your viewers. Thank you very much for having me here as part of the podcast. And you're doing wonderful service and happy to be part of this.
No, thanks. Thanks for your kind words, Subbu. Let's start. I'm a little curious about Rakuten. I think it started in 2014. So correct me if I'm wrong.
Rakuten India started 10 years back, but Rakuten as a company started 29 years back, essentially in Japan, with e-commerce as a primary business. But then now it has over 70 different businesses catering across e-commerce, travel, fintech, payment, everything basically. So there is a global business also. We call Rakuten Rewards in US,
Hmm.
and we have our messaging platform, Rakuten Viber. So it's a really truly global company with 70 different businesses across the world. And Rakuten India is the global capability center, one of the largest development center outside of Japan. And Rakuten got established sometime back in 2016 or so. The work started some
Hmm.
2014-15, but then it got established and became Rakuten India as an entity. This is in fact our 10th year in operations, and it's been a phenomenal growth engine for Rakuten as such, basically.
No, absolutely, Subbu. And let's come to your current role. You're spearheading,
Mhm.
cloud, ad tech, martech, and I think corporate IT, and so many. So, could you give more, background about your current role at Rakuten, Subbu?
Sure, sure. Currently, I head the technology platform divisions. And so the technology platform division has, as I said, most of the platforms that are get built for the businesses in Rakuten. So be it our cloud platform, which provide, most of the infrastructure platform database services, as well as our ecosystem platforms, which are very, very critical for membership in terms of
Mm.
identity platform, our marketing clouds, and our incentive platforms. And then we also have our advertising platforms. We
Mm.
also have a Telecom BSS platform, which provide
Mm.
a business support system for B2B, as well as we are in the verge of building our B2C as well.
Mm.
And we also have our corporate IT system as well as infrastructure division here. And
Mm.
finally, the command center, which provides a global command center for 24/7 for many services. So that's my portfolio. And in the last 6 years or so, I've been, with Rakuten. And so each one of these, led by a capable team, leadership team, as well as a team, which provide, a very critical, product development capability, infrastructure, operational capability that
Mm.
keeps the Rakuten business running day in, day out, and
Mm.
with focus on product-led innovation. That's how the team is
Yeah.
set up and delivering for last 10 years. Yeah.
No, no, absolutely, Subbu. Now, it's like a shared services, right? It's like the global shared services. And how many different parts, other than India, how many other parts there are GCCs? And in India, what is the headcount it looks like, Subbu?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what the shared services word actually means. Essentially, so we call ourselves a, extension of our global development team. With
Okay.
headquarters being Japan, and India is one of the largest locations. Like I said, we have development centers in U.S., Europe, as well as Taiwan and China. So these are all various. So as any organization, global organization leverages the capabilities across the globe. And that's the uniqueness about Rakuten is having, more than 100 plus nationalities working together in a
Mm.
mission for, contributing to society through, entrepreneurship and innovation. That's been our global vision and mission, right? So in India, we are right now roughly around 1,500 plus, members across product engineering,
Mm.
program operations, and
Mm.
everything essentially. Yeah.
Sure, Subbu. Now, for example, you mentioned about shared services. I think it looks like a shared services. With my limited knowledge, I think, if, for
Mhm.
example, if you take HR shared services, so if
Mhm.
you have a GCC in maybe the US and in India, and some, let's say, an employee is having some, compensation issue or something, then from India GCC, maybe the if they have the shared services, the HR is able to solve sitting in India. So that's, I think, to my limited knowledge, this is what we call as shared services.
Understood. No, you're absolutely right in that context. But yeah, here it's mostly of the product engineering development. The
Mm.
other support functions, or we usually call them as partner functions, whether
Mm.
HR, finance, talent acquisition,
Mm.
L&OD, it's all very much localized for each of the regions, essentially, right?
Correct.
Because the context is different and the
Mm.
people that we serve is different in each region. So
Mm.
those services are catered, but definitely they collaborate with the global
Sure.
organization and global teams to make sure that how much we can leverage the commonality so that we
Mm.
don't have to reinvent the wheels on certain areas. So that's how it is set up essentially.
Sure, Subbu. Now let me go a little bit deep into your expertise. You're spearheading so many business units at Rakuten. It's e-commerce, AdTech, MarTech. Now, see, you're looking at something called platform, right? At one end, at the same time, you have to look into the business, specific, the customization. Now, for example, e-commerce, the e-commerce unit and the telecom, they'll be using the same cloud, same compute, storage, everything. But when it comes to customization, you will have to go a little bit. So where do you actually draw the line between platform thinking versus the
Mhm.
business specific executions? So
Absolutely. Thank you. Very good question. So I think, see, platforms thinking or platform does not sit in a siloed way, right? In the end of the day, technology is the enabler. Technology is built to serve the business purpose, essentially. So most of the products originate with the specific requirement of whatever businesses that we serve for. Then once we start building, then we really look into essentially, what part of this is, or some of these are, constantly being used across multiple businesses, and then how do we then come up with an approach of platformizing that essentially, right? For example, if you talk about identity as a platform, in earlier days, definitely each business would have started with their own ID services. How do you authenticate and authorize, each members coming in? But then that's not a scalable way. So when business grows, when opportunities grows, and the membership, as we call our customers, they grow, then you need to have a way of how do you do this better. Essentially, that's what the platform thinking comes in. Essentially, right?
yeah,
And it's very rare. I would say someone build a product thinking platform. There are examples like that, but then it's very rare. But companies like Rakuten, which is purely focused on consumers, our business,
mm,
serving them, our merchants, start with addressing those capabilities or features that they need, right? And then slowly take them to look at essentially how do we make this as a platform. So at some point, there is an inflection that happens when you start
mm,
building for a business and then slowly understanding. And that comes with deep understanding, right? Each business are unique. There are, it's like, Lego blocks, I call it essentially,
yeah,
right? You have to build certain parts of the Lego blocks which are,
mm,
foundational, and then you allow the customization for other areas of the business to plug in. So that's the way I see it essentially is how Recron also evolved in terms of, because, sometime back, we never probably had a thought process of, cloud as a platform. But then in
mm,
almost 6, 7 years, 8 years back, we said, no, we need to have our own cloud.
mm,
And that's what
mm,
we call it as a one cloud platform. But we also support multi-cloud because the nature of business is you cannot just limit them in particular hyperscalers and things, right? So that's how the evolution happens. So I
mm,
think it is a question of basically constantly keeping the focus on business. What is business now? How do we
yeah,
serve the business? And
mm,
how technology is truly an enabler for them. And
mm,
then how do you build some of these as we go along when we get more understanding of what our each of the customer needs, and do we see a pattern in terms of
Mm.
how each business is asking, and is there a commonality, and then is there a better way for us to do that? And that's the journey I think every organization goes through in terms of how do you move away from that business specific customization to platform specific thinking.
Sure. Could you share an example? Initially, which one did you started with at Rakuten? Subbu?
I think one example I can think of is essentially, is also, one of the product that we built is a B2B
Mm.
product, in observability space called Rakuten 6 Sense. And I think 4 or 5 years back, this started as an idea, right, where the, command center was supporting multiple business in
Just
monitoring
one.
and.
So, observability for the viewers who don't understand,
So the
observability is
observability
hot
is
topic.
primarily, yes, it's a very hot topic. It's primarily about application monitoring, your infrastructure monitoring, alerting, and this leads to most of how do your mean time to detect, mean time to resolution, mean time to alerting, all those things comes as part of
Maybe
it.
if
Any
somebody is using Snowflake or let's say Databricks,
So those are there, but
compute
this
of.
is yeah, this is mostly the market has you have your Neuralink or App Dynamics. These are observability players, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so these are used for monitoring your systems, the health
Okay.
of your system, whether it's infrastructure, your
Mm.
database, or application, and then proactively take actions if you feel there are any challenges or issues that are going to occur, right? And that's where our journey started 5 or 6 years back when we were
Mm.
supporting
Mm.
many applications.
Sure, sure, Subbu. So moving on to the follow-up question to this. Now, the major difficulty or in any large enterprises, the higher management that the people are facing is how to convert the C-suite vision to the till the line managers, right? So, what is your take on this, Subbu?
Yeah, I wouldn't stop only at the line managers, even at the end
Yeah.
engineer, right? So one of the thing I always say is essentially it's very, very important, both from top down and bottom up. There is a clear, a fluidity of idea and exchanges that happens essentially. That's how, organization thrives and grows, and able to grow. I think, this is something called strategy deployment or strategy execution, which is
Mm.
something which, I've been, you know, fortunate to learn, during my, days at Flipkart and later, built the experience around that is you need some level of, what we call as the strategic deployment or strategy execution toolkits. One of the famous is OKR, right? How do you convert the strategic choices or strategic vision that management or leadership has in order to executable, initiatives, and which ties back to the key results, right? And
Mm.
so it is very, very important to have that exercise done both from top down and bottom up.
Mm.
And obviously, it's not going to align 100%. There will be a little bit amount of, what I call is the gap, which is healthy. It's okay. But
Mm.
then understanding that and how to bridge the gap is very, very important. And that gives a clear visibility even to the engineer at the nth level working on anything. And I
Mm.
always say that you go and tap a engineering shoulder and asking, what are you doing?
Mm.
And he or she should say essentially, hey, what I'm working is going to impact this key results and impact these metrics and is going to contribute to this goal, right?
Mm.
And not like, okay, I'm just building some code, I'm just testing something. It should not be like that. So to me, the leadership ownership is there to how do you bridge this gap seamlessly? How do you convert that strategic innovation or strategy objectives that management or leadership has, and
Mm.
then put them into meaningful, OKRs, and then that lead to certain initiatives. And how do you map that initiative back to the key results? These are very, very important, and that's something every organization ought to do in order to make sure that the machinery of execution is
Mm.
not disconnected from what is the strategy, thinking process is. That's the way I've experienced myself and how to bridge this gap.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's never going to be 100% bridging the gap. There will be a
Yeah.
little bit gap, but then majority, how do you make sure that there is a clear, collaboration for the top and bottom up happens?
Yes.
And through this, how do you ensure
Mm.
the strategic objectives are met on the ground and we are able to deliver to the business outcomes?
No, Subbu, one more question, right? Rakuten is a 800 plus, headcounts, GCC, and you are, to you, I think there are 5 to 6 VPs who are reporting, and there are many. directors and senior directors. Now, what is your team building mantra, and how do you ensure the trust factor among the team, Subbu?
Yeah, so like I said, Rakuten is a 1,500 plus organization
Yes.
in India. So, and my span is around 800 plus or so. To me, what I've come to, understanding or based on my experience is, I always call this as the, three pillars of transformation, right? For any organization, any team to go through that is, based on trust, quality, and delivery excellence. Like trust is to
Mm.
people, quality is to the process, and delivery excellence to your product and technology, right? And I firmly, not only believe, but I also know that how this systemically changes the way how the teams comes together. And I've seen this, transformation happening in the team as well as individual leaders and things. To me, trust is very, very foundational and fundamentals, and it's a two-way, right? It's not only one way, essentially. And with the help of some of my L&OD leaders, when I worked in the past in Rakuten, we have come up with what are the fundamentals of this trust. Is it's about how do you create an environment for everyone to speak up, basically, because
Yeah,
while titles hierarchies exist, but the
yeah,
fundamental thing is there should be an environment people should be able to speak freely and share points,
yeah.
thoughts, opinion, feedback, right? And that is how organization helps. And this goes back to what I said earlier also. Your neck doesn't spin 360-degree, and
Mm.
everyone has a blind spot. So, and that is very, very important to create an environment where people are able to openly come and say, hey, you talked about this, but this is what I think. Is that something I'm missing, or is there something wrong? And that environment is very, very important, irrespective of title or functional boundaries or whatnot, right? And second thing is in the trust itself, we talk about partnering up, essentially, right? It's not about you hire capable people and say, hey, you do this work, you do this work. It's not the way to operate, essentially. Then the question is basically how do managers and team members come together? Are the partners? Because managers are interested in ensuring the team is delivering to the expected result, but then creating an environment for them to do. But how do I partner, essentially? Once you do these two things, I firmly believe they move into empowered up status, essentially, right? So that's why I call it
Mm.
speak up, partner up, and empower up, where the teams automatically take the ownership and accountability, saying, hey, if
Yeah,
something is, missing here, I will raise my hand and do it. If I need help, I'll raise an hand and ask for help. If someone needs help, I will go and do that, essentially. And you create that kind of a collaborative environment,
mm.
not by enforcing anything, but then creating an environment where everybody feel valued, everybody feel that they are trusted, everybody can openly share things and work together. And that's something which I've consciously seen how the team transformation happen, and that uplevels the team in terms of that. And that's the fundamental behavior I see on the trust. And then the quality is not just about testing or bugs, but then every aspect of your work that you're doing, how you're consciously doing quality, thinking about the end result. And the example I always say is essentially when Usain Bolt runs a 4 into 100 meters relay, it's not that if he runs under world record time they will win. It's also how he passes the baton to the next person, on things, right? As a team they have to come together. So
Yeah,
it's very, very important in every aspect of your work. How do you think quality, not from your perspective, but other person, the end customers, you have to think through. And that's how quality mindset has to be there in everything you do, essentially. And the
yeah.
finally, delivery excellence is
Mm.
not a destination; it's a continuous journey. And how
Mm.
conscious you are thinking through that. How are you, improving from last year to this year, last month to this month, or last yesterday to today? How are you consciously looking at it excelling, right? And how do you create that environment? For example, we have done something called Skill Up, where we look at how can people continuously, skill them up, essentially, because otherwise you come, you take some task, you deliver, and you go on. This cycle repeats. But then how do you break the cycle? Is you give some meaningful, opportunity for them to learn, and what they learn, they immediately put that in use in what they're building. Uh, Creating environment for ideas to come. So we have run something called Ideathon, where
Okay.
we take people's ideas and then move them closer to the business thinking, saying that what would help the customers build. And those are some of the avenues which have helped us essentially. So these are the way I feel, it's the behavior has to be at all three level, like I said, people, process, product, and tech. and how do you seed in that with the help of trust, quality, delivery, excellence, and each organization is different, each
Mm.
company is different, each team is different, because
Yeah.
the fundamental ingredient is people. and
Correct.
and usually, everyone gets it. Okay, here is a formula. Usually step 1 to 2, do it. 1 to 10, do it. It will work. I don't think so, because every individual is unique and
Mm.
every organization is unique. So you need to really understand that to then, see what is work for the DNA for the organization, and you build it. And that's the environment that will up level everyone essentially.
Sure, sure, Subbu. Thank you. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
sharing.
Thank you. Essentially.
Sure, sure. You kind of preempted a couple of my questions about collaboration and all, but let me come, with the
So,
one follow-up question to this, Subbu. Now, I understand, there is some expectation from the top, and so your take on, I mean, your comments on standardization versus speed. You want, Subbu, but I just want a
uh,
practical example which you really faced, and how did you
you
do
mean
it?
the you mean the standardization of what?
Versus speed. For
Speed. Okay.
example,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. No, I think so. It is again to fundamentally to understand what is the real objective there, right? Essentially, speed doesn't exist on its own dimension. Essentially, it has to serve the purpose of what is needed. Essentially,
Hmm.
and some of the time, like one of our Rakuten Shugi principle is speed, speed, speed. Essentially, right? And the world with whatever changes happening in terms of whether it's a VUCA world or Bani world, whatever we want to call,
Yeah.
speed becomes imperative advantage for organization essentially. But speed also needs to be aligned with the direction that you're running essentially, right? Otherwise, you're running in
Hmm.
speed where you're heading in a different direction. That's not right essentially, right? So I think the question is, how do you balance that with
Yeah.
knowledge and information that you have essentially? And I always say, you may not have all the 100% information ready in order to get going. But then what is the information that you have that you can go in the direction and at a speed? And then the ability or agility to change,
Hmm.
when the new information comes, that becomes very, very important essentially, right?
Sure.
Because you cannot always go with, closed, information saying that, okay, this is all I have, I'll just run with it. You have to continuously scan the environment for what other additional new information comes in, and
Hmm.
how do I change that in order to meet the goals,
Hmm.
is something which we'll have to constantly keep looking. And this comes out in many initiatives. When we start something,
Hmm.
we usually go with, business is not going to give 100% of the requirement what they want usually.
Yeah.
And as you as a product owner or product leader needs to understand, okay, how much part of this is fleshed out and what is that we can go. And
Hmm.
then even when building the systems and things, what level of modularity or extensibility we need to keep in mind,
Hmm.
starting from architecture and design patterns, in order to go about, when new information come in, how we are able to weave that through and then
Hmm.
continue to build and execute. So that's something which, is what I would always, recommend the teams to look at essentially, because
Okay.
today information is going to be 100% available, and
Yes.
you have to start planning, start delivering with what you have. But you also need to continuously keep in a mechanism. How do you then take new information and then relook at what you have done, and then keep moving at a faster pace essentially.
Sure, sure. No, thanks, Subbu, for sharing that. No, actually, I was asking in the previous question also one more
Mhm,
thing. So you said, there's always not going to be 100%. So one example,
mhm.
if you could share, Subbu, when maybe anonymously, when
Yeah, I think one of the things what we I can think of is essentially, there is a scenario where we have to do something, in order to take a vendor
yeah,
dependency out, right?
okay,
And if you have to really look at that, it's going to take a longer timeline essentially. Maybe more than 3 years or so essentially, right? But then the leadership vision is not to take that much long essentially.
okay,
And even though whenever plan, whenever execution, planning came out saying that yes, it will take that much.
hmm,
But once we understand the leadership vision, then we have to go and look at how do we slice and dice this,
got it.
in a meaningful, componentized way. And then how do
Hmm,
you split this in a way that we can at least
got
deliver something in a 12 to 18 months period, and then continuously iterate, right?
got it.
And then that is what I meant essentially, the informational change.
Yeah.
Because in a traditional way, you will say, hey, no, there's no way we can do beyond,
Yeah.
less than 3 years. You just fold it
Mm,
undone. But that's not how it works right now, right? You
mm,
really understand why leadership is asking for that, and there is a
yeah.
business imperative. It is there.
Mm,
Then the technology, team or product and technology team is okay. Now, how do I go back to the drawing board, knowing that this is what we have committed, but then how can we come back and then, see? It's not just reducing of time, right? You have to look at
mm,
various aspects of customer impact, your components. How do you then slice them? How do you then phase them in a way that we're
mm.
making meaningful progress, essentially, right? So that is one example. I'm not sharing, detailed example, but
Sure.
then that's one reason thing that I can think of, essentially. Yeah.
Sure, sure. No, thank you so much, Subbu, for sharing. Pretty clear. And now you mentioned about collaboration. I said you prem. So, how do you balance? How do you design otherwise so that there is an effective collaboration between let's say, product, engineering, and the platforms? So, I think that's your sweet spot.
No, I think, see, one of the thing I always say is essentially, end of the day, we're all one team, basically, right? Because when a customer receives a product, and it's not working to the expectation of what customer asks, he or she is not going to think that, oh, QA didn't test this properly, or product
Mm,
didn't write the requirement properly, or engineer didn't code it properly. They're not going to think like that. They're going to say, hey, this company didn't deliver to me properly, right? So to me, it's always about, even though the teams are playing a functional role, be it product engineering, QA, or DevOps, but the mindset should be we are one team, essentially. You should always look at outside of your functional boundaries, essentially.
mm,
And I learned it from my, one of my, manager who used to, I used to work with. He always called this as a boundaryless leadership, essentially, right? And to me, that is something practically we can look into. And that's what I guide or coach the team, saying that, hey, while you do your functional work, which is very, very important, but then don't constrain yourself. Think on your, left and right or up and down, basically. What are your, inputs? What are your outputs? You have to think beyond your functional boundaries and say, okay, what
mm,
if my delivery is going to the next person or the next function? What would they think? What would they need? What would I need to make sure their life become easier? The end product is delivered as per the expectation to the customer, right? So to me, functional boundaries exist for a reason, but my, always, sharing to my teams or to leadership is essentially, you don't have to get constrained in the functional boundaries. You have to
mm,
see beyond functional boundaries and see how do we come across as a team. And that's how the collaboration happens. And then obviously you create environments,
mm,
for example, there are many ways to do this. One of the way I attempted, inspired by Spotify model and things is from,
mm,
informal guilds, basically between engineering manager and architect, or your SREs working in different department, your QA working in
mm,
different department. And this is something which I've, practically done. I've seen the benefit because then the team comes together to share their
mm,
experiences, share the challenges, look
mm,
at what other teams are doing, get
mm,
some insights into best ways and better ways to do things. And
mm,
and as a leader, you need to enable those environment where the synergy happens
mm.
in an informal way, and in a, culturally, sensitive way, in order to make sure that everybody feels that, they're contributing, they're adding value.
Sure, sure, Subbu. We're shifting the gears slightly,
Mhm.
Subbu. Now, asking this question on behalf of the entrepreneurs and the startups out there. You are a product person, and whenever there is a new demand or demand of certain capability, right? You have a choice: either build it internally, and I'm sure when it is your core, obviously you're going to not outsource it or not going to look out for the vendors, or certain aspects you look out for the vendors. So at Rakuten, what is the culture when it is coming down to buy versus build? And if you're going for the buy option, Subbu, what are the different parameters with which you're actually evaluating the vendors, and what can be the red flags which they have to be mindful about, Subbu?
Definitely. I think, there's a clear difference between startups and established companies when they go into this, right? Because, startups are resource constrained. When I say resource here,
Mm,
mostly the financial aspect, right? Whereas established companies have resources that they can go and buy any
yeah.
major software products or vendors, right? So, So that, to me, it's all about the time to value or the time to market of what it is. And like you exactly said, is this a core for her or is it a periphery for us, essentially? And these are some of the choices that we need to make, essentially.
Mm,
And some of these are very, very proprietary, because if your business is dependent on this, and do you want to make yourself dependent on other vendor, essentially,
mm,
right? So, having done this kind of work, in my consulting experience also, where I helped companies
mm,
to choose software products. So we used to call it the spec and select methodology, and spent almost a decade in Bay Area consulting for startups, mid-sized and large-scale companies. One of the things always kept me, in this is essentially what is the real value the customer needs, essentially, right? And for example, I can tell one, major engineering design company, a global leader, I was put in front of the VP of Finance, and through my business development leader, said, "Hey, we have a big challenge in AP and AR, and we are using this X ERP system, and but we are struggling, essentially. What do we do, essentially, right?"
mm,
And at that time, when I looked at it and did some, analysis, interviews, looked at the data and all those things, it's very easy for me to go and say, "Oh, you know what? I'll put a couple of consultants and build this for you," right?
mm,
But then I also understand there is a product in the market which is exactly solving their,
mm,
need. And incidentally, one of my friend was working in this product company, heading the consulting, and I just reached out to him saying, "Hey, this is a customer problem. Would you guys able to do it?" And they said yes. So all I did was I introduced this company to the client and say, "You know what? This is the best solution for you right now. You should go ahead," essentially. And the reason I'm saying this is essentially it's very easy to go in the track saying, "I'll build it myself
yeah, yeah,
and put an engagement," and the customer will not know they are coming to you for the right advice. It's easy to do that. But if you look at it from your perspective or your company perspective, yeah, that's a great move, essentially.
mm,
But then, are you serving the customer need is something which you need to question, right? And then you say, okay, this is the right choice. And later it worked. And obviously, the customer loved it. And
mm,
later we got additional, business from them. That's a different story, right?
mm,
So what I'm
mm,
trying to say is, you need to be very objective, keeping out your passions or your own interest away, even whether in your company, when you're choosing that or you're
right,
doing a consulting work, in order to really, what is the time to market to the value for this? What does the business need? And sometimes, you may have to do this because the time to market is very, very important, critical,
mm,
and you cannot build it. And why do you want to? And after some time, then you can make a decision. Say, okay, now that it is stabilized and we're able to understand, can we build it in-house, it essentially?
mm,
And those choices have, changed over the course of, business, trajectories, right? And there are various examples I've seen it where we went in with a particular product and then said, hey, because we need to launch this very quickly, we don't have any other, way to do that. Let's do that. But after 3, 4, 5 years, we have used this. Hey, now that we have stabilized and we have also built another variant of this product on our own,
mm, mm, mm,
can we now extend this product to cover this, use cases and scenarios
mm,
also? And that is what an example I talked to you about, which would take 3 years. We are
yeah,
doing it, right?
yeah,
So that's a classic example where we had to go with the by choice, essentially. But then that by choice is there only for a certain number of years.
mm,
Now we are saying, okay, now that we have established this, we have served our customer, we understand this, can we now build it essentially on our own and extend whatever we're doing into the. So it is very contextual. I don't have a magic
sure,
formula saying that do it.
sure,
It varies from scenario to scenario, companies to companies, what risk they want to take,
mm,
whether they want to forge a new business, whether they want to
yeah,
protect their business. So those are high level parameters I would say to
sure.
look at essentially whether you're going to the build or by choice essentially.
So, according to your experience, I think you have more than 5 years at Rakuten. And how you have seen? Is it you're buying or is it you're co-creating or you're acquiring? What is the normal trend? And you clearly called it out that you have, I mean, indirectly you mentioned you, I mean, the team at, let's say Rakuten India GCC, they have the budget and they have the influencing capacity to onboard the vendors. So,
So mostly, in the core hardcore business serving product and technology, it is developed completely from Rakuten side, essentially, right?
okay.
But if there are, for example, if you talk about, partner services or your, shared services, whether some of the HR systems or, financial systems, those are definitely bought essentially,
Oh.
and definitely that comes with global guidance. What
Mm.
global organizations. So the leaders here work very closely with them and understand, and
Mm.
then with the guidance from global, those decisions are made to buy. So that's the way I look at it essentially. For
Sure.
any core serving business, it's the product is completely built, from here. And
Mm.
obviously there are, areas where, for example, for infrastructure, we might buy some products and things, which definitely,
Mm.
guided by global guidance, right? Because the market is, all in global, right? So
Sure.
Rakuten as a business does not have any specific business in India.
Mm.
So the majority of these choices and decisions will have to be consulted and given feedback to the global leadership, and then the global leadership based on inputs take the decisions accordingly to see
Got it.
what serves the purpose of the business across the board.
Sure, Subbu. Thanks for sharing that. Now we have come to the second last, part of the podcast. So this is a very common question which I'm going to ask, keep asking many of my guests. So one small story about your resilience, Subbu, because you seem to have such a versatile role, and you're taking care of so many, business units at Rakuten and earlier at Flipkart. So maybe your personal or professional, any one resilient story which is coming first in your mind as I'm asking, and which really uh, tested your nerves and kind of created the person you are. Uh,
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the question. It's a great question, and many stories. So I will not go into the
yeah.
stories of this. But fundamentally, when I look back, in my 3 decades of career and things, there are several point in time, essentially, where you have so many challenges, right? Whether it's a personal or professional. And the question is essentially, what keeps you going? And when I look back and see what it is, and yes, you can call it as a resilience or coming up to the feet and then moving on and things like that. So what I've always looked at it essentially, how are you able to keep yourself
No,
step
we want a
back.
story, Subbu. You're giving. We want a real story. I mean,
Like I said, the stories are many, many, and I cannot pick
okay,
one favorite of that. That's what I would say, Rachel, right? And
okay,
like I said, there are dozens of stories like that. Basically, I'm
okay,
not able to pick one of that. But what I'm saying is essentially, whenever I've gone through these, phases
okay.
in my career, essentially, and there are cases where it was personal, for example, your visa, choices are not there. You have to move back, something like that. Or
Okay.
professional choices that, you're selecting between a companies, when the offer comes, or, all those things, plays out, right? That's what I'm saying,
Okay.
and when you look at all those things, essentially, the first important thing to do, in my experience, again, and each person is unique in ways of how they come up to that is how do you, keep yourself, away from the situation and look at it as a third person to the situation, right? That gives a lot of clarity. And obviously, I've been fortunate to be, doing my yoga practices from 2006. So that allows
Mhm.
me to, look at this in a third person view, saying that what is the situation. So that is very, very important, because that then drives you to the being awareness of the situation, because most of the time these situations for many that are happening is very, very what I call is consuming, right?
Mm.
And if you get caught up in the situation and you go on, there's a lot of things you'll do reactionary, so
Mm.
that is why this keeping a distance allows you to look at it from a third person and then say and create that awareness of what is the situation about, why am I going through this, what is this happening, and you
Mm.
look at it in a very holistic 360-degree way. So that is
Mm.
first thing. Second is I've been fortunate to have many, many mentors and guides and coaches in my life. And that's very, very important, essentially, for anyone going through any of these, scenarios in their life or personal or professional. You need to build your personal board of advisors, basically, right? And
Okay.
and because they are the one who is going to, and there is a reason our head doesn't spin 360-degree, because everyone has a blind spot, including myself. And this question of basically when I look at it, my professional journey or not, what I see is basically in all this point in time, I had my mentors who I reached out to and share scenario, share my thought process, share what I'm thinking, and they're able to give me points that which I missed essentially.
Okay.
and they're able to shape it, saying that, hey, so have you looked this, have you looked this, okay, you're thinking right, but what about this, right? And that really helps, basically. So that's the second thing I would say. And the third thing is, like, what is your own convictions in terms of your values and principles and things, right? And do you make those choices for someone else, or are you making for yourself, essentially? Because end of the day, whatever said and done, what is happening is your experience, right? And
Mm.
how are you convinced that whatever choices you're going to make, are you going to live with that and deliver to that 100% or even
Mm.
200%, right? So to me, if you have to codify, that's the three things that I codify is basically
Yeah.
how do you create that space within yourself and
Mm.
create that awareness so that you understand the gravity of the situation. Two, having a good set of mentors. It's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. Even one
Mm.
or two or three, it's very, very important to have your own personal board of advisors who look at it from different perspective and give you, the insights of what you need to do. And the third is whatever said and done, it's your conviction that's going to carry forward. So how are
Sure.
you convinced with the choices you're making? Those are the three things I would say, Nagesh.
Wonderful. No, no, wonderful. So, personal space, I think you're practicing in the form of yoga. Second, as a mentors. And the third is your own conviction. I mean, after you're going to face it, it's your conviction. Super, if I may ask, do you practice yoga every day? So,
Yes, I do. I do.
how many hours,
Yes.
if you don't mind sharing?
It roughly between my physical and the meditation, it will be around 1 to 1.5 hours usually.
Oh,
Yes, yes,
every day.
every day. Yes,
So, is it a guided? Do you?
it is. I learned my practices from Sadhguru as part of Inner
Okay.
Engineering Asia Foundation. So I practice that since 2006. I've been practicing, and
Okay.
that has been really, really helpful in terms of all the life situations I've gone through and where I am today.
Wonderful.
Definitely, that has helped me a lot. In where I am today.
No, no, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing because great. Even I follow Sadhguru, by the way. So, sure. So, and if you don't mind sharing, who are your mentors and how often do you spend time with them, Subbu?
Many, many, basically. And, at least I try to be in touch with them, every, month, at least once or twice,
Is
definitely.
it their your
And
spiritual mentor or your professional mentor?
no, these are professional, the mentors who I have gathered in my experience, as I've gone through many part of my life. And, I myself has taken, coaching couple of time in my
Yeah,
career,
you
for
mentioned earlier.
myself. Yes.
Mm.
So, some of them are those coaches, some of them are ex-colleagues, who I've worked with in the past, who knows me well, because you need someone who understands you well,
Mm.
and not, at a superficial level,
Yeah,
giving some, what we call it a gyan, right? We don't
yeah,
need that,
correct.
right? We need someone who is, honestly able to share, even
Yeah,
if it's something which is uncomfortable, they're able to share with it. So I have,
yeah,
close of 4 or 5 of them like that. So
wonderful.
whenever I go
Okay.
through that, and I kind of reach out to them, and they've been really, really kind enough for giving time to me and
Mm.
helping me. And that's one of the reason I also try to help and coach people, as part of my, activities, to see how I can help people also in this journey.
This is how you're giving back to the.
Yes,
Yes, wonderful.
absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Sure, sure. No, no. Thanks, Subbu, for sharing that. Now we are coming to the end of our podcast, which is
Sure.
a fun rapid fire question. So I'll be asking five questions, Subbu, and
Okay.
try to be, answer it in a shortest, manner
Okay.
possible. Because many speakers, I have to limit their explanation. So,
Okay. I'll try my best.
sure, Subbu. So, one word to describe Rakuten's engineering culture.
Customer centric.
Wonderful. One tech buzzword which you wish should disappear.
AI.
Oh my god, how? Okay.
Because it should become pervasive. We should not be glorifying it as we are doing right now. It's
Okay.
one of the technology and tools available, and now we have to see how to bring AI in the loop and make our life better and make our products better and things, basically, because there's been too much going on with the word basically
Yeah,
now.
AI and
That's what
agentic AI.
that's what come to my mind basically.
Sure, sure, sure. Subbu. Now, if you had a magic wand and you can solve one engineering problem, okay, what it would be, Subbu? Maybe at your current role.
It's about predicting what the business want and building it, beforehand, essentially, because we should not be waiting for business to tell us essentially this is what we want. And that's why I want the technology to be closer to the business, understanding, what the business want and foreseeing that and building that, much early.
Much
That
earlier.
way we help the business, in proactively.
The speed versus
The
the
speed which is yes.
yes, got it. Sure. One habit that makes you feel a better leader every day. I think I already have that answer. I think you're practicing yoga and sure, maybe or anything else you want to add to that, Subbu?
No, I think, yeah, definitely meditation is a practice that I would definitely call as one habit and things. And the second thing is about, this is called as a servant leadership or anything. It's about basically as a leader, how are you helping to create an environment for people to, thrive to be their best, essentially, right? And that's the way I would look at it. It's not about you, because leadership is not about you doing the work. It's about creating a space for others to do their work much better, even better than you, essentially, right? So
Mm.
being that awareness, and a habit is essentially how can you always help the next person, whether you're in a team or a peer or whatnot, and having that habit of basically how do you help them? How do
Mm.
you, ask this question of how can you solve what they are, going through right now? That becomes very, very important. And that's a conscious, choice of asking, how do you help? What can you help in that, essentially, I would say.
Sure, Subbu. Now the last question: speed or perfection? Which one will you choose?
Tough choice, basically, I
Okay,
would say,
from
yeah.
Rakuten's perspective, Subbu.
Yeah, Rakuten, as you say, like I said, one of our principles is speed, feed, speed. And we also have another, what we call a Shige principle, the hypothesis, practice, validate. So it's a question of basically, you can never get into perfection, in one time, essentially. You always have to iterate, and Japan as Kaizen principles and
Yes.
things, essentially, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, you have to move with a fast, you have to deliver it in speed, but then you also learn from what you have done and then experiment and then do it again, right? So until you get to perfection. So perfection is never a destination, it's a
Yes.
continuous journey. So to me, how do you balance between that speed and perfection is very, very important, is what I feel.
Okay, so you kind of slightly go with perfection, Subbu.
Little bit of perfection, but speed is important to get to that. And perfection is never going to be the first time you're going to achieve
Yes.
perfection. But then how quickly you go through, understand, validate, come back, and then redo it, right? And that's how you keep on improving the perfection. So to me, I'll tend on to the speed side. The end goal could be the perfection, but then, take actions, basically.
Sure, sure, Subbu. It was really, insightful and really wonderful
Thank you for
having
the opportunity.
you, Subbu. And, thanks for sharing the examples here and there. And, thanks
Sure.
for taking out time for us and the audience, Subbu. Looking forward to be in touch with you and hosting
Thank
you
you.
in
Thank you
more.
very much. Yes.
Absolutely, Subbu.
Thank you, Nageshwari, for you and Good Business for giving the opportunity. Hope you and your viewer will enjoy this, and happy to learn from all of you if there is something which I can, help me to grow as well. Thank you.
Absolutely, Subbu. Thank you.